I'm content. I'm happy to be here.
Me too. So happy. That's what I did that on purpose because that's what I sound like in the beginning. So happy.
So happy. She's so happy to be here. Anyway.
I'm Yara.
I'm Morgan.
And we are
Mysteriosities. I liked the little British take. Anyway, we're back. We're back and gonna buy me new headphones.
Yeah.
Because my poor ears.
Her poor soft Keebler ears.
Yeah, they can't hang with the headphones.
Do your ears hang low?
What?
You ever heard that song?
No.
What? Do they wobble to and fro?
What?
Can you tie him in a knot? Can you tie him in a bow?
Why are you tying your ears?
I don't know. It's a weird song. It's on Barney. I used to be a huge Barney fan when I was little. And I had this cassette tape. And I listened to it so much that Barney started sounding like a possessed demon.
He is.
You know,
he probably is.
Like when cassette tapes started losing their... They'd be like... That's what it sounds like.
You mean cassette tapes almost all the time anyway?
Right.
Basically.
And you have to get a pencil eraser. And
you're showing your age right now.
I know.
Anyway. So. Circling back around.
Our topic for today.
Our topic is the Lost Colony of Roanoke.
Woo! So,
that was the crowd going wild.
It's funny. There's a funny story about this.
Yes, what is the funny story? Tell me.
You know the funny story.
I know, but
okay, you want me to tell it?
I want you to tell me.
So, in the beginning, when we were picking our topics, Roanoke was one of the top topics.
It was going to be my first episode
that Morgan did. And she started doing a lot of research on it, but then she's like, no, I don't know if I want to do this yet.
Low key, because it's actually not that mysterious if you actually look into it. Oh shit, my headphones came off my face. If you actually really look into the history, it's kind of, I don't want to say clear cut what happened, because there's no like full, total, and complete, like this is what happened, but it's a little more cut and dry than it seems. So I was like, I don't think this is a good starting topic.
Right. But still interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then we read our first legit review from our first reviewer who we don't know. And she actually replied to us and told us where she heard us, or where she heard about us, rather. And I told her, well, you know, since you're our first reviewer, the least we could do is... take your advice on the topic. So do you have any suggestions? And she picked Roanoke. So I was like, cool. We could do that in the next few episodes. So then I texted Morgan about it and she's like, it's so funny because I have half of my research done. So we could probably do it next. So surprise.
Here we are already doing it.
It's a lot sooner than we thought.
Yeah, because at that point I had picked a topic, but I hadn't even started it yet. So I was like, yeah, that's actually really easy to just
It kind of fell into place for us.
Yeah, it was sitting in my little folder, and I was like, okay, I'll pull it out. Though I will say, when I went into it, it wasn't as halfway done as I thought. It was like a page, and it was my first attempt at doing research, so it wasn't very good either. So I ended up not really using it.
But still.
But yeah, I still had like the basis of the knowledge in my brain, which was very useful. But yeah, so it was very easy to just swoosh on into that and say, we're doing this right now.
Yep.
And you talked to her probably on like Wednesday or something.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was late-ish. It was late-ish in the week. I think it was like Wednesday, and then we just swooshed, and then here we are.
Yep.
I don't know. This week has been a blur.
Welcome.
Anyway, we're starting. So this is very similar to the Titanic in that I have so much history that you're
We like history.
that you're going to be like, excuse me, is this a history podcast?
But the difference is I won't have quotes.
Yes, there are no quotes to be had, which is a little bit upsetting, but yeah, so I have like hella notes, but you kind of need some background too.
I remember the Roanoke episode on Supernatural.
I don't.
It's pretty early in the series. I don't know which season it is, but it's like, remember where they go and like everybody's kind of like disappeared, and well, not disappeared, but then they get like the zombie virus, and then they have to like save the people, and it's in there.
But I am watching Supernatural right now, so maybe
You are.
it will come up. Yeah, I'm finally watching it all the way through. I usually only watch the first 2 seasons and then stop. Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's called, CROATOAN.
What season is it?
Season 2, episode 9. It's after Crossroad Blues and before Hunted.
I swear I'm past that. I have no recollection of that episode.
Maybe you were
I'm
sleeping.
looking it up.
Sam has a vision of Dean killing a man tied to a chair, leading them to River Grove, Oregon, where Sam recalls the story of the Roanoke colony.
Oh, you know what? I think I'm like really close to there, but not there yet. Okay. I lied. I'm literally on season 4. I guess I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know. Okay. We're really going to start now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting with there's lots of history.
Lots of history. Love it.
This is going to feel like the History Channel for like 70% of this episode. Okay?
Or the Low Bros.
Or the Lowbro History Podcast. Link in bio. But also, you're going to have lots of fun with me and some pronunciations later.
Oh, here we go.
Because
it's my fave. My favorite is when you look at me like, did I do it? Did it sound good? And I'm like, yeah, that was good. Like your cheerleader.
I just like it when you tell me. Okay, so History Channel.
History Channel.
So
then I really will fall asleep. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so you've heard of Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes.
That was a long pause.
I know. I was trying to think of something clever to say and sarcastic, but I decided to not go with it because I couldn't think of anything else.
Because, that's like Henry VIII's daughter with Anne Boleyn.
Yes.
Okay. Well.
I've talked of her, too. I've spoke of her before.
Spoke of her fondly on several occasions. Our dear Queen.
Remember the spooky forest one? I talked about her. And her mans.
Oh, yeah. Humphrey Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty.
There's something with a D in it. I don't know.
Something. I can't remember.
Humphreys. I don't know. Okay, whatever. Irrelevant. So, wow, there's a Humphrey right here. That's weird.
Because we're talking about Queen Elizabeth.
No, it's not that. Not that Humphrey.
Oh, just kidding.
So, we're starting off in 1578.
That was before America became America.
Yeah, no shit.
I know, before the colonies even existed.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's going down. That's what's going to be going down.
It's going down for real.
She gave a charter to a guy, and his name was Sir Humphrey Gilbert.
Sir Humphrey.
Yes, and Sir Humphrey, his charter was was given to him so that he could explore and colonize territories
in America.
To explore and colonize territories, quote, unclaimed by Christian kingdoms, end quote, which
means fuck the natives.
Which means fuck this land that already has people here. It's not Christian land, so it's ours, or something. Just 1500s things and
religion.
1600 and 1700. Just forever. Just the history of our world.
Still trying to corrupt us to this day.
Literally. So, that was 1578. And then, when he died, that charter was divided between his brother and his half-brother. So his brother was Adrian Gilbert, and his half-brother was Sir Walter Raleigh.
Oh, I know him.
Oh, do you?
I know
personally? Have you met him on your
I'm actually a time traveler.
Time traveling endeavors?
Yeah. No, I know the name.
Good. He's in the story a lot.
Yeah, he's important.
So, Adrian's charter gave him the patent on Newfoundland and all points north, and then Raleigh was awarded lands to the south, even though a lot of that land was already claimed by Spain. and, the people whose land it actually was. Basically, It was double claimed. But, they didn't care about that. They didn't care about if Spanish claimed it. They didn't care if there were people there. They were like, this land's for you, this land's for you. Go do your thing.
Go do your thing.
Go do your thing. So, Raleigh's charter was issued on March 25th, 1584, and it specified that he needed to establish a colony by 1591, or he would lose his rights to colonization. He was to, quote, discover, search, find out, and view such remote, heathen, and barbarous lands, countries, and territories to have, hold, occupy, and enjoy, end quote. Which, okay. So, the plan was to establish a base so they could send, privateers out on raids to try to get, steal treasure from Spain and, just XYZ. They needed a base to get started, kind of, you know what I mean? Even though he had that charter, right, he didn't go on these exhibitions.
Are you? Yeah.
Did it? Exhibitions.
Yeah.
Good, this word's in here a lot. Every time I wrote it down, I was like, oh, that word always gets me. Because I always want to say exhibitionist and, exhibition.
Exhibition is what you always say. Exhibition.
Whatever. The point is, he did not go by himself. He delegated the mission out to people.
Right.
To go and see and conquer,
like
whatever.
Governor Radcliffe.
Who?
Alex knows what I'm talking about. Go ahead, continue.
Who?
You don't know who Governor Radcliffe is?
No.
He's the bad guy from Pocahontas.
From what?
From Pocahontas.
Oh.
Jamestown.
Okay. Jamestown was referenced.
No, that's right, because I know what I'm talking about. Did you see that shoulder shimmy I did?
Yeah, I wish everybody could see the shoulder shimmy that you did.
One day.
So he delegated from London, basically. So, first attempt to explore his claim started on April 27th, 1584.
Okay.
It was called the Amadas Barlow Expedition. Yeah, I said that right.
Yeah, expedition.
And the fleet consisted of two sailing it's a word that I don't know how to pronounce, but I don't really want to look it up. It's called a Baroque.
Obama?
No, Barque.
Baroque.
Baroque?
Yeah, have you ever heard that joke? If it's not Baroque. It's a style of music.
Well, then that's incorrect, because I'm talking about a ship.
Well, I don't know. The only ships I know is the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
Oh, it's just a bark. It's just a bark.
You're on your references today.
I am.
It's a bark.
Because I can't do Titanic quotes. So I have to come up with other shit.
It's a bark.
A bark.
And those are...
Of a tree. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Those
if
are...
looks could kill. Okay.
You don't need to show me a picture of Radcliffe from Pocahontas in between the cracks of those two computers.
You
I
want me to
remember
sing
what
the
he
song?
looks like. Yeah, I do.
I'll when we get to Jamestown, I'll see.
It's a really small reference to Jamestown.
Oh.
Well, it's after Jamestown.
When is it? 1610?
I don't remember, but I just know it's after.
I think it's somewhere around there. The Virginia Company.
Okay, so are you going to sing the song?
No. Go ahead. I can't think of how it starts.
Okay. Well, a bark is a sailing vessel with 3 or more masts, in case you were wondering.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into, I have a longer explanation about what a bark is, but it's just we're not going to explain it.
It's a ship.
It's a pretty big ship, okay?
It's a big old ship.
And then a man whose name was Philip Amadas was captain of the larger vessel, and then Simon Fernandez was the pilot, or
It's probably Fernandez.
I don't know, there's no Z.
Is it an S?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Fernandez.
Okay, Simon Fernandez was the pilot, and Arthur Barlow...
You gotta say it in the Spanish accent.
No, I don't, that's offensive.
Fernandez. That's probably what it is. That's how you speak Spanish.
Okay.
That's right.
I never took Spanish, so I don't know.
I took 3 years in high school and 2 years in college, so I know some.
And then Arthur Barlow was in command of the second ship.
Okay.
Okay. And there's also some indications that Thomas Harriot and John White participated in the first voyage. The relevance of that is that John White would later be the governor of Roanoke,
Okay.
the colony, the second attempt.
Okay.
But there's no direct confirmation that they were there. So they went west to the West Indies to collect water, and then they went north and made landfall on July 13th, which they landed at like a little inlet north of Hatteras Island, and they named it Port Ferdinando after Fernandez. Okay?
Okay.
So after they made landfall, they encountered I already forgot. They encountered the CROATOAN on this trip, and they controlled Roanoke Island and the mainland between Albemarle Sound and the Pimlico River. So that's like the area that they had. Okay, but they established like for relatively friendly relations with the tribe, and Granjanamo, is that what he said? Mm-hmm. He represented them as his brother, Wingina, was the chieftain, and he had been injured recently in a war with another tribe, so they met with his brother instead.
Okay.
And Amadas and Barlow spoke like pretty highly of the tribe's hospitality when they returned to England, but they also talked about like the location of Roanoke and like how strategic it was and how good of a spot it was. And I'm like, yeah, a spot where you met with people who already have this land, so like why are you talking about it like you could just have it? I'm confused. But they were like, oh yeah, they were really nice. That was a nice little trip. And they actually brought back two natives that they'd encountered on their travels with them to England when they came back. Juan Cheese, and who was a CROATOAN, and Monteo, who was a Croatian island, but it's spelled differently for the tribe. It's just Croatan.
Okay.
And Monteo's mother was the chieftain of CROATOAN Island.
Okay. A woman?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. Female power.
Hell yeah.
Let's get it.
So, the expedition's report was talking about, like, the region and how, like, pleasant it was and how bountiful, and they compared it to, like, the Garden of Eden and the Golden Age, and just talking about how great it was. To which I'm like, why do you just need more land than you have? You know what I mean? You already have a country. Why you be talking about other people's bountiful land? But whatever. We're going to take a little pause to talk about Juan Cheese and Minteo before we go on, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, because they're both kind of relevant. Oh, God. We're both kind of relevant to the story going on. So, Juan Cheese was the last known ruler of the Roanoke Native American tribe. So, he traveled, like I said, back to London with them in 1584. And he and Minteo created, like, a sensation at court. Like, by that I mean, obviously, people were like, oh, these strange people.
Yeah.
So he was hosted, or they were both hosted at Durham House, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was like Raleigh's house, but I forgot to write that part down. And during that trip, he assisted, along with Manteo, he assisted a scientist by the name of Thomas Harriot with the job of basically trying to teach him the Carolina Algonquian language.
Mm-hmm.
And Juan Cheese was not really interested in, like, learning English or befriending his host, and he remained basically, like, pretty suspicious of them because, like, why wouldn't you be?
Right.
And basically, eventually he began to see himself as more of a captive and less of a guest in London. So he returned to the New World in April of 1585, and he sailed with Sir Richard Grenville's Expedition the Tiger, and basically when they got back, he slipped away from them to return to this is a long word, I'm going to look at it for a second. So he slipped away from them basically and returned to Dasamampok, which was likely their capital, which was on the western shore of the Croatan Sound. Mm-hmm. And Grenville sent people to, like, get him back, but the villagers wouldn't, like, let them have him back, which, like, hi, I thought he was a guest. So, like, yeah, he doesn't have to come back. What do you mean?
Right.
So he went back, and he did not return to, like, the English ever, obviously. And that was, like, around when he ended his good relations with them. And this is a little later, just, like, a general, like, this is his sort of, like, just a blurb about him. But, like, when there was hostility later on with the first group of settlers that were there, he was identified as being a part of, like, a hostile group. and by Lane, but also by Manteo, who stayed with the English for a while.
Okay.
So Wanchese was a leading member of a group that was, quote, harassing them, that eventually drove the first group off. And then there's nothing further known about him after that. So
Okay.
that's Wanchese. I just want to talk about him because I saw that them in like passing mention, and I was like, I'm intrigued. So
Can you spell his name?
Wanchese.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to visualize it.
And now we're going to talk really quickly about Manteo, who was a Croatan. And that was a smaller group. That was when his mother was the chieftain of. That was a smaller group that they think was either a branch of the larger Roanoke people or at least aligned with them. Hello, Minerva. And accounts say that he was like far more cooperative. So basically when they made it back to Roanoke after their initial trip, you know, where Wanchese like slipped away and was basically like, yeah, fuck this, bye.
Right.
It
Was
was,
Manteo like more accepting?
yes, he was
Okay.
way more cooperative, like with like Thomas Harriot trying to help him learn like Carolina Algonquian, the language.
Right.
And when they returned to Roanoke in 1585, it was like too late for them to plant crops and like harvest food, so he helped them make it through their first winter. It's also said that he went back to London a second time, basically after the first colonists were like settled. I'm not sure if he left with a group or like when they were run off. I'm not sure when he went back to London, but he did go back to London in 1585. And he stayed there long enough for like when the second group was coming to establish what would be their Lost Colony. Like when that group came
Right.
to that area, he was with them on that ship. So he
Okay.
returned to Roanoke with them. And then in August of 1587, he was actually christened on Roanoke Island, and that made him the first Native American to be baptized into the Church of England. He was considered like a trusted friend, a teacher, a guide.
Like Squanto.
What?
Never mind.
Who?
Squanto.
I should know that,
The
shouldn't
Pilgrims.
I? Okay.
Okay.
So basically, he was like a guide to the English while remaining loyal like to his people, and he's considered especially when it was super unstable. So he was considered like a really good example of like positive race relations in early American history because he was like helping them,
Right.
but not like betraying his tribe. So a mediating figure between the English and the Native Americans. Though some people did consider, like some of people in his tribe did consider him to be disloyal to them and a traitor during times of conflict, just because he had like really high status among the English. And then following the abandonment of the Lost Settlement, we don't know anything else about him. So whatever happened to them, it's possible he was still there, so it also happened to him. He might have left before. So we don't know what happened to him after Roanoke became lost. He could have still like been there or whatever. So the first attempt
Okay.
was largely planned as a military operation. It was focusing on like exploring and like the evaluation of like natural resources in the area. So Ralph Lane was appointed the governor. Philip Amadas, who we talked about earlier, he was on the first little scouting trip kind of, was the admiral. And then Sir Richard Grenville led the overall mission.
Okay.
So there were a couple like civilian attendants. There was a metallurgist. Yeah, metallurgist.
What does that mean?
Has the word metal in it. I wonder if it's about like metal.
Metal.
I'll look.
They look for ore.
Yeah, it is about metals and alloys. You investigate and examine the performance of metals such as iron, steel, aluminum, nickel, and copper and use them to produce a range of useful products and materials with other certain properties.
Like knives and swords.
So, there was one of those. There was Thomas Harriot again, remember him?
Yeah.
And there was an artist named John White. And again, this is the ship that Manteo and Wanchese came back on.
Right.
So the first exhibition failed basically because of lack of supplies and poor relations with the local Native Americans, which,
Wanchese probably didn't help.
he was back with his people, and he was like, no, I don't trust them, which, valid. But we're going to go into a little bit more of, like, what happened, because it's important to understand that, to then understand what exactly the Lost Colony would be walking into when they arrived. So, first problem was the supply issue. And the main reason for that issue is because one of their ships wrecked and lost like a lot of their supplies. So the provisions that they had couldn't accommodate like the settlement and as like how large they wanted it to be and like the people that were there. So about 100 men stayed with Lane, which was enough basically to fulfill like their objectives that they had until another fleet could come and bring them more supplies. And that fleet was planning on leaving England in June of 1585. So that was going to bring more supplies, but also more people. But they didn't know that that had actually been delayed because they had been redirected to Newfoundland. So then the supplies they were waiting for, even further away from actually getting there. So while they were there, Grenville, if you remember, he was like in charge of the whole operation. Mm-hmm. He organized a little trip to explore the Pimlico Sound and the Socotan, is that what it was in? Socotan. In the Socotan villages of Aquasagog, Pimlico, and Socotan, and they made contact with the locals while they were there. So this is the first little, okay, great. This isn't great. Are you ready for what happened? Mm-hmm. So after they went on this little trip, a silver cup was reported missing, and Grenville thought it was stolen, so he sent armadas to lead a detachment back to Aquasagog to basically be like, give us back our silver cup, right? And the villagers were like, what? No. And it's not clear whether they had it and wouldn't give it back, or they never had it and didn't know what they were talking about. It's a cup. I kind of feel like they probably just lost the cup. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody stole one cup. Either way, the villagers did not give them the cup. And the English were like, no, they need some retribution now. So do you want to know what they did? They burnt down the entire town, all of their crops, because of a cup. Because of a cup that they probably lost. Huh. So that's a great start.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because of a cup.
And it was silver, too.
Just silver.
Not gold.
No. Nope. And it was just one cup.
Probably wasn't very big.
Somebody was probably drinking some ale out of it and got drunk and threw it in the river.
Just threw it in the river?
Probably.
What river?
I don't know. They probably just threw it in a river.
That's funny.
Instead, no, it's stolen. Let's burn a town. Anyway, so that's a great start. So you remember Manteo?
I remember Manteo.
So he arranged a meeting for Grenville and Lane with Granjanimo. Remember him?
Yep.
Granjanimo. We talked about him. And the meeting was basically about providing land for the English settlement on Roanoke Island. So they agreed about the location being pretty strategic for access to the ocean and to avoid detection from Spanish patrols. So they're basically, all right, yeah, this is a good spot. So then Lane began construction of the fort on the north side of the island. Mm-hmm. And then that is when Grenville headed back to England and left 108 men there on the island. So, because he was going, I believe, to get more supplies. Maybe. Or maybe he was just like, peace, I'm going back to England. The colonists spent the autumn of 1585 basically getting corn from neighboring villages to help them because they had very limited supplies. They also got, like, you know, some venison, some fish, some oysters, enough to sustain them through the winter. But by spring, relations between the colony and the Socotan was, like, becoming a little more strained, and most people think that's likely because of their colonists' over-reliance on their food.
Right.
And
it's like when you have, like, a house guest that just, like, won't leave. And you're like, come on, man. They're eating all your snacks. And
yeah. You're like, what are you giving us? How are you? You're not paying rent.
Right.
You're just eating all my food.
Right.
Yeah. So then.
Stay away from my Pringles.
Exactly. I do love Pringles.
Me too.
So then Granjanimo died. And he'd been a pretty powerful advocate for the colonies, so that didn't help matters either because
they lost kind of their...
Yeah. They lost a person who was, like, kind of helping them out. Mm-hmm. So, after that, a lot of stuff went down.
Uh-oh.
So, Lane, if you remember Lane, he's kind of he's the worst. So he took a group out to explore, and Pemisipan, who was the new leader. Do you remember when I said that the chieftain had been hurt in a war, and that is why when they first came, they were speaking with Gran Janimo instead of the chieftain?
Right.
And the chieftain's name was Wingnina. Is that what we said? That's the same person. He changed his name.
Oh. Like, was he being sketch?
No, he just changed his name to
He just felt like being somebody different.
Pemsipan, which means like he who watches, I think is what it said. Let me verify that actually.
Kind of intimidating.
Exactly. I think it was kind of meant to be like,
he's like, yeah, now, bitch, I see you.
Like, and now we're not playing around. One who watches. Yeah. And it says, I didn't write this down, but since I'm on here, it says basically that was suggesting a newly cautious and vigilant policy, like on like everything that was happening, sort of like. And it is also said too that the English didn't immediately recognize that the developments that were going down was a threat to their interests. They didn't immediately know, like, oh, this guy was our ally and he's dead, and the chieftain changed his name. They didn't see any red flags yet, right at first when that happened. Okay?
Because the white people are always so self-centered.
Yeah, they're living in their own little world.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this land is my land, much. This land is your land, from California to the
New York Island.
Yeah.
From the Redwood Forest. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so.
This land was made for you and me.
But mostly me. That's what their song is. So, Lane took a group to go exploring, and Pemisipan, who we spoke about, same person, he supported that plan, and then he told him that the Roanoke leader, Melatonin. No.
I'm just kidding.
Melatonin was meeting his allies and planning on an attack on the English, basically, and that 3,000 warriors were gathering. So, Pemsipan also sent word to Melatonin that the English were coming. So he was kind of trying to stir something up, basically.
Yeah.
So when Lane got there, he caught them by surprise and captured Melatonin, that was when he informed him it was actually Pemisipan. Is that what I said before?
Yeah.
It was
Pemisipan
who had actually requested the council in the first place.
Okay.
So like the people who were gathering and the attack on the English, like, was his plan, but then he sent Lane there, and so then Lane ended up ransoming Melatonin and had another person named Sakito held hostage, so he sent him back to Roanoke as a hostage. They basically headed up the Roanoke River, and they were searching for Shaunus Timotin. I don't remember what that means, but they only found deserted villages because he had thought that like there would be villages and like Native Americans and tribes that would be willing to provide them provisions along the way, but Pemisipan actually sent word to them that the English were hostile and that they should withdraw from the river with their food and not help them. So, Lane and his party eventually returned after Easter, and everybody thought that they were dead, basically. And Pemisipan was preparing to withdraw the Socotan from Roanoke Island and basically leave the colony to starve, because as we already spoke about, like, they were like mooching, basically, and they were surviving because of how much they were helping. So he was like, okay, Lane is, like, their leader is dead.
No more Pringles for you.
Their leader is dead. All the people that went with him are dead. And now we're going to leave them here, and then the rest of them are going to die. Mm-hmm. But then Lane came back, and he was obviously pretty shocked that he was alive. So because of that, he kind of reconsidered his plans for a little bit. So there was a little bit of an accord, a little agreement, a little peace moment, because there was another elder amongst Pemisipan's council who was arguing in favor of the English. So for like a brief little time, everything was chill after Lane got back.
Okay.
They were vibing, but then guess what happened?
What?
The pro-English elder, the one that was like supporting, helping them out, died, and guess who took his place?
There's so many names. Who? You're talking about Pemisipan.
Yeah, who joined his council? Wenchese!
Oh, okay.
Wenchese joined his council, and do you think that he was pro helping the English out? He was not.
No, he's like, let's kill these bitches.
Well, I don't know about that, but he did convince them. He did convince Pemisipan that they were a threat. So they ended up evacuating from the area, destroying all of the fishing weirs and ordering people not to sell food to the English. So they basically were like, bye. And so without them, the English didn't have any way to produce enough food for the colonies. So Lane had to have men break up into smaller groups to forage and like basically beg for food from people in the area.
Panhandlers.
Yeah, like first panhandlers. And then Sokoto, do you remember him? He was being held hostage.
Yeah. With the M1.
Monteo.
No, not Monteo. It was the other guy. There's so many names. It's okay. Sakito and...
Oh, no. Minatonin?
Yeah.
No, he ransomed him, so I think he's back.
He's back, okay.
But Sakito was still at Roanoke because he was sent back as a hostage, right? And
sounds like Taquito.
Pemisipan like met with him regularly and kind of thought that he was on with the whole anti-English cause. Mm-hmm. But Sakito actually wanted to maintain like good relations with the colony, so he actually told Lane when Pemisipan planned. I said Pemisipan.
It was a Pemisa plan.
Yeah.
That's probably what he called him. When he had a plan, he's like, I have a Pemisa plan.
He should. I mean, that name is perfect for having that. So he actually warned Lane when there was a plan to organize a war council. And the plan was basically to ambush Lane and the key leaders when they slept and then signal for like a general attack to get rid of everybody else. So because Lane was told about it, he was able to send like disinformation to the tribe to kind of like force their hand. He basically had information get back to them that a fleet from England had arrived. Mm-hmm. So then Pemisipan was like, we need to accelerate this plan ASAP before the fleet like fully gets here and then we're outnumbered and we can't do it. So he gathered as many allies as possible. And then while they were gathering, Lane and along with 25 other people visited Dasamongpok that we talked about earlier, the capital. And they arrived under the pretense of discussing that somebody had tried to come in and like free Sakito, the hostage. And once they were let in, because they thought that they were just discussing, like a little hostage situation, they all attacked them. So they attacked all of the, like, Pemisipan and all of the allies that had gathered there. Lane and his group attacked them, and Pemisipan was shot, but he was able to flee into the woods. But then Lane's been caught up to him and brought back his severed head, which they impaled outside of their fort.
Jeez, that's violent.
Mm-hmm. So then, all in all, Lane ended up abandoning the colony while waiting for Grenville to get back with supplies. Remember Grenville? He pieced to go get supplies. So he returned to England in 1586. And then Grenville did end up coming back like a couple weeks later. And when he left, they left behind a small group to like protect the claim, which at this point, can you just like take the L and leave? Like any small amount that you're going to leave there, they're not going to be able to do anything.
Right.
And it's such bad terms. Like they just impaled the leader's head on a spike outside of the fort. And now you're leaving a small group there. For what reason? Just take the L and leave. Like, okay, you tried. Bye. Go away. But yeah, so Grenville left a small group there to protect the claim, whatever. And then he went back to England as well. And then guess what happened? The small group was attacked.
Right.
Because they just killed their leader.
Yeah. Who would have saw that one coming?
What a shock that you would be mad about that. So basically what happened when that small group was attacked, which by the way was like 15 people, I think. Like that was literally it. So basically 5 of them were gathering oysters and 2 attackers approached the camp, killed one of them, and then 28 more attackers revealed themselves. So another Englishman escaped to warn the unit, and then a second Englishman was killed, right? So the remaining 9 retreated to the shore, and they fled the island on their boat. They found the 4 other people who were gathering oysters, picked them up, continued to Port Ferdinando, and they were never seen again.
So these were all men at this point. They didn't
Because
bring
this was a
anyone, 'cause
military. The first
They were
attempt.
just trying to colonize.
Yeah, the first
Okay.
attempt was a military and like exploration and like looking at the resources. So it was like
Right.
not like women and children the first time. It was like soldiers and people like that. So that's the first attempt. I know it was a lot of stuff.
I'm ready.
Are you with me though?
Yeah, I'm ready for
You're with me?
attempt number 2.
You're with me? You understand?
I do.
Okay. So the whole like long ass reason we told all this story to get the backstory is like wanted to make sure you realize like they burned a village to the ground over a cup, and they killed a guy and put his head on a spike, and now the second colony is gonna come and try to do the same thing.
Dumb.
You stupid? I don't know.
America.
Yeah, literally. Now we're on the second attempt. So you're with me.
I'm with you. This is the second attempt.
So the second
Second?
expedition was led by John White.
The artist.
No.
That's what they said.
Yeah. He was an artiste, if you will.
I was like, I
mean,
sound
he
like a
wasn't-
little kid. I was like, that's what they said.
Well, John White's like a pretty basic name, so for a second I was like, I'm
Yeah,
not
it could've
convinced
been
that was
another
the
dude.
same person, but then actually he was a bit of an artiste. I mean, he wasn't like an artist, but he had some artistic skills. So he was sent on an expedition by Raleigh to establish the city of Raleigh and Chesapeake Bay. Okay?
North Carolina.
Well, nothing was, but yeah. So their plan was...
Raleigh.
Good job.
Thanks.
So Roanoke Island obviously was not safe anymore for English settlers after everything that happened, obviously.
Right, because they be pissed.
As we have discussed, like, not a good plan. So their plan was not actually to go back there. They were going to go and use Chesapeake Bay. That's where they were going to have their new colony. Different place, close-ish in the grand scheme of things, but not the same. Okay?
Okay.
So approximately 115 people agreed to join the colony, but this time it was a lot of middle-class Londoners hoping to become like landed gentry. They wanted some land and opportunity and all that
Right.
shit. So this trip was more like families,
Right.
and like it wasn't like a military operation.
Okay.
So this little trip had 3 ships. They had the Lion, which was captained by White, with Fernandez as the pilot again.
The tiger and the bear.
No, and then they had
I'm just
they had a fly boat and then a fully rigged pinnace, which were just like different ships that
What were their names?
they doesn't even say. They didn't even get to have
Okay,
names.
then in my opinion, it's going to be the tiger and the bear.
Okay.
Okay.
So on they departed on May 8th, and then they arrived and anchored at CROATOAN Island on July 22nd. And that is because they were going to go check on the people that Grenville left behind. You know,
Right,
So, like,
to see if they're still alive. That was a good one.
oh my God.
I need caffeine.
Then go get caffeine.
I'll be okay.
But you just yawned.
I know. I'm awake, though.
But you just yawned.
I
I have
always
coffee
yawn.
right there. Oh, okay.
I have monsters upstairs. I'll get one later.
Okay. Well, so the plan was for White to take about 40 men aboard the smaller ship. The pinnace is like the type of ship. And they were going to take it to Roanoke to check with the men that were stationed there, and then they would proceed on to Chesapeake Bay where they wanted to
Right.
start their little colony. But basically Fernandez ordered the sailors to leave the colonists on Roanoke. He was like, no, we're not going any further. You guys are getting off here. So we don't really know why he did that.
So were women on that then?
Yeah, that's the colonists.
Okay.
It's the 115 people that agreed
Right,
to join the
okay.
colony.
I got it now.
But they stopped at Roanoke, so White
like-
could take a smaller group of men to check on the other people who were there, take them with, and then go to the colony that they were going to make in Chesapeake Bay.
Got it.
But then Fernandez was like, nah,
Just
y'all
stay
are
here.
getting off here. So that's what happened.
Maybe he's tired of feeding them.
So before everybody got off the ship, though, White and a group did take a little trip to Lane's colony to try to find the men that were left behind. Obviously, the fort had been dismantled, the houses were overgrown and vacant, and there were no sign of his men except for human bones of the 2 that were killed.
Oh, just the 2.
Right, because the other ones, remember, they fled on the boat, and then they were never seen again.
Mm.
So there were no sign that they were there. So, yeah, nobody to find, nothing to do about it. But then all of the colonists disembarked on July 25th because the fly ship arrived, so everybody was there. So that's when we were like, well, I guess we're getting off here because Fernandez isn't going to take us to Chesapeake Bay, so I guess this is where we're going. So they all got off the boat, the ships, and decided that this was going to be the spot, I guess. And shortly after they all got off, a colonist by the name of George Howe was actually killed by a native while searching alone for crabs. So obviously already off to a start of relations were bad here.
Right.
And they're still not going to be great. So then John White dispatched a guy named Stafford. Dispatched Stafford and Manteo, you remember Manteo, to reestablish relations with the Croatan. And though it was when they went to do that they told them about Grenville's detachment and what went down and how they were attacked. So that's when they found out about that. And then they tried to negotiate a truce through the Croatan, but received no response. Because remember, the Croatan's a smaller little group.
Right.
They didn't have big beef with them. The problems were with...
Were they the ones with the female chief?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they tried to negotiate a truce with the tribes that they did have issues with through the Croatan, but nobody answered. So then, August 9th, White decided to lead a preemptive strike on Damamascapoke, as we talked about, the capital. Mm-hmm. But they had actually already withdrawn from that village because they had basically thought that they would attack them after they had killed that settler who was crab fishing, crab hunting. Mm-hmm. So they had actually already left. And so there was Croatan looters that were there, so they accidentally attacked them instead.
Oh.
But Manteo managed to smooth relations over between that whole situation, and that was around when he was baptized. It was around that point.
Okay.
So basically, they went to go attack some people. There was nobody there, so then they attacked their friends on accident, and then Manteo had to smooth it over again.
Well, how do you... It's silly.
It is silly. My thing is, how do you not tell the difference between somebody who lives there and somebody who's looting?
That's what I'm saying.
They're obviously probably looking for things to take, which is a much different vibe than a village full of people that are living there.
Yeah. Stupid.
It's not the same thing. So then around that time, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter christened Virginia, and she was the first English child born in the Americas.
Okay.
So it is around this time that the fleet was preparing to return to England, because if you recall Fernandez, you're bye. So they were praying. They were planning to go back to England, and the colonists were trying to determine if they should move and if they should relocate 50 miles up the sound, but by foot, I don't know, it seems like a lot of work. And it was around that time too that the colonists were like, John White, Sir, Mr. Governor Guy, can you return to England with the fleet and tell everybody, and we're a bit desperate for help here, we need more supplies, we need people, we're on this place that we weren't even supposed to be here, we were supposed to be somewhere else, and somebody already got killed, and we need help. So he didn't really want to leave because his daughter was there, his wife was there, his
dog. That's what I thought you were going to say. His dog was there.
No, I realized that I kind of forgot to say, how I said Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter, Kristen Virginia. That was his daughter. Okay. So that's his daughter and his granddaughter. Okay. And obviously Eleanor's husband was there. So he didn't really want to leave, but he did. He left on August 27th, 1587 with the fleet. So that's another reason why the whole Fernandez thing is kind of confusing, because he was like, yeah, we're not going to take you any further. You're getting off here. But then, why did he let John come back with him to England to ask for help?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just kind of weird. Mm-hmm. It's you feel like if you were really trying to be no, you can stay here, you would then also be no, you can't come back and ask for help.
Right.
You would just think that they wouldn't let him back on. So it's kind of weird. The whole situation's kind of weird. But he returned to England. They got back on November 5th of that year. But it's around that time that the Spanish Armada was mobilizing for an attack, and Queen Elizabeth had prohibited any able ship from leaving England basically when they would need it for the battle. So he wasn't able to come back immediately. So yeah, Spanish Armada was coming. Queen Elizabeth was like, no able ship is leaving England. We're going to need it. But then Grenville.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, obviously, like, what they're doing over yonder is not as important as, like, protecting England from being attacked.
Right. Like, let's focus on the
land that's actually ours.
Already established.
The land that actually is our land. And not the land that we just have decided is our land.
Right.
But in the winter, Grenville, remember Grenville?
Yeah.
Okay. He was granted a waiver to lead a fleet into the Caribbean to attack the Spanish, and White was allowed to join him in in a resupply ship.
Okay.
So that fleet was sent to launch in March of 1588, but then unfavorable winds kept them in port until Grenville received new orders to also stay and defend England. So they weren't able to go. And then, after that happened, it was determined that 2 of the smaller ships in that fleet weren't really even suitable for combat, so White was allowed to take them to Roanoke. They were basically like, nah, these aren't really going to help us out. Fine, you can take them. But then they departed on April 22nd, and they were attacked by French pirates on May 6th near Morocco. And 24 of the crew were killed, and all the supplies were looted, so they had to return to England. So once again, he wasn't able to actually make it there. What?
Nothing. I was just being stupid in my head, thinking about French pirates.
Okay. Well, then, oh my God. Then the Spanish Armada was finally defeated in August, but England maintained the ban on shipping in order to focus on efforts on basically organizing a counterattack to Spain. So White was not able to gain permission to make a resupply attempt till 1590. And if you remember, he left in 1587. So 3 years later. Anyways, so eventually he was able to find passage on a privateering expedition organized by John Watts. Lots of Johns. So that was 6 ships, and they would spend the summer of 1590 raiding Spanish outposts in the Caribbean. But then the flagship Hopewell and then the Moonlight would split off to take White back to the colony.
Okay.
And so they anchored on August 12th at CROATOAN Island, but there's no indication at that time that he contacted the tribe, the smaller tribe.
Right.
At that time for any information or anything like that. So they anchored on the north end of the island on the 15th, and they saw plumes of smoke. And then the following morning, they investigated more smoke on the southern end, but they didn't find anything. So then they spent the next 2 days trying to cross the Pamlico Sound with considerable difficulty, and people died because the waters there were just not, it was difficult. You'll find there's a lot of issues with, they always had unfavorable winds and water and weather and etc. Right. So on August 17th, they sighted a fire.
Was that hurricane season, do you think?
I don't know. I don't remember when hurricane season is.
Yeah, me neither.
The hurricane season is defined as the 1st of June through the 30th of November.
Yeah, so it was hurricane season.
Okay, that would make sense.
So they sighted a fire on the north end of the island on August 17th and rowed towards it, but they didn't reach it until after nightfall. So they didn't kind of want to come to shore at night and stroll up on them at night. Because I feel like they were probably a little worried. Right. So they didn't want to come ashore at night and sneak up on them on accident or anything like that. Plus they also didn't know for sure it was people they knew. So what if they rolled up on a hostile situation? Yeah. So instead, they spent the night in their anchored boat singing English songs in hopes that they would hear them and know that it was them. Then they made landfall the next morning, which was actually White's granddaughter's 3rd birthday, which is kind of ironic. And they found fresh tracks in the sand, but they were not contacted by anybody. So they discovered the letters CRO carved into a tree.
Right. Yeah.
And then when they reached the site, he noticed that the area had been fortified with the palisade, which is like a stake wall, basically.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You can picture it.
Like a palisade.
And then near the entrance of that fencing, that was where the word CROATOAN had been carved into one of the posts.
Yeah, I remember this.
Or a tree.
I thought it was a tree.
I thought it was a tree too, but I wrote posts for some reason.
Maybe it was a post.
So this says that CROATOAN was carved into a post and Crow was carved into a tree.
Okay.
But then this says that it was all carved into a tree. So, it was carved into things.
Into some sort of wood thing.
It was carved into something where you could carve things.
Right. Wasn't metal.
So White was so sure that this meant that they had relocated to CROATOAN Island because they had agreed when he left that they would leave a secret token indicating their destination, or they would leave a cross pate as a duress code.
Okay.
So he was like, well, that's not a duress code, so they must have gone to CROATOAN Island. So they found that the houses had all been dismantled, and everything that could be carried had been removed from the area. And several large trunks, including 3 that belonged to White that he had left behind, had been dug up and looted. And none of the boats that were left could be found along the shore either. Everything was just gone. So they returned to the Hopewell that evening, and they made plans to return the following day, but the Hopewell's anchor cable snapped, which left them with only one working cable and anchor. And because of that, there was like a higher risk of shipwreck, so they really couldn't risk continuing the mission.
Right.
So Moonlight, the other ship, set off for England, and the crew of the Hopewell basically offered him a compromise where he was like, well, where they were like, what if we spent the winter in the Caribbean and then we returned in the spring? But then that plan fell through because the Hopewell was blown off course and forced them to stop for supplies somewhere else, and then when they weren't even able to land there, they were forced to change course back for England. So they weren't able to return. And they got back in England on October on October 24th of 1590. And then he died in 1593, never finding out what happened to his family. So following that, there were several other investigations into what happened.
Right.
So, Raleigh, the guy who never goes himself and always sends people, he actually went transatlantic in 1595, and he claimed he was in search of the lost colonists, but he later admitted that this was misinformation because he was actually looking for El Dorado. And then on his return voyage, he said he sailed past the Outer Banks, but the weather prevented him from landing there. And then, sassafras.
Who's sassafras? What?
Isn't sassafras a plant?
Oh, I thought you were calling somebody sassafras, like they were being sassy.
No, sassafras, the plant. The price of it skyrocketed, so he sought to enforce his monopoly on Virginia, and he funded a 1602 mission with the stated goal of resuming the search. But mostly that manifest and the itinerary all indicated that he wanted to harvest sassafras south of CROATOAN Island, and it wasn't really about finding them at all. It was about money and sassafras.
Stop.
It was about money and sassafras. And then when they were actually going to go look for the colonists after the whole sassafrasing, bad weather prevented them from lingering, so then they left again. There's a lot of weather and you know what I mean? We already said hurricane season, whatever.
Right.
So then Raleigh was actually implicated in the main plot. Do you know about the main plot? Good, because I looked it up because I didn't either. And he was arrested for treason against King James in 1603, and that effectively ended his Virginia charter. So the main plot, which I had never heard of.
And this is when Governor Ratcliffe comes in.
Yeah, he would be coming in after that, yeah. So the main plot was a conspiracy by English courtiers to remove King James from his throne and replace him with his cousin, Lady Arabella Stuart. So that's what the main plot is. So Raleigh was implicated in that, and he was arrested for treason. So that ended him being there, going there, sassafras, colonists, nothing, he was done. So then there was Bartholomew Gilbert, and he led an expedition in 1603 with the intention of finding the colonists. And their destination was Chesapeake Bay, but bad weather forced them to land in an unspecified location near there. And then the landing team, including Gilbert, was killed by a group of Native Americans for unknown reasons on July 29th, and the remaining crew went back to England. So they didn't find anything. And we don't know what happened, with the landing team or, what went down between them. And then there was John Smith.
John Smith.
John Smith. So, in 1609, what?
I was thinking of his song in Pocahontas.
Which song?
The Virginia Company reprise.
Oh.
I fucking love Pocahontas. It's my favorite Disney movie.
basically, he was captured in 1607 after the establishment of Jamestown, and he was captured by the...
Algonquin? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you say that?
Algonquin?
No.
Oh.
I thought you said Pow. It's like the Powhatan.
Oh, Powhatan.
Powhatan?
That's the chief. Chief Powhatan. That was Pocahontas' dad.
Yes. Good job. So while he was captured, he basically was described a place where there were men who wore European-style clothing and had walled houses. And I kind of like pasted something in here in a weird spot. And he was also told by Powhatan that he had killed the colonists. He had basically said that he had done, like it was them.
Chief Powhatan?
Mm-hmm. Powhatan,
okay.
Yeah. Apparently Powhatan's priests had told him that a great empire would rise from the Chesapeake Bay, and so he sent his men to slaughter the tribe living there. Well, no, because he said that it was a tribe and people with white faces, so implying that they had integrated into a tribe, and then they'd killed the tribe and the colonists.
All of my knowledge about this comes from Disney, so.
Which, that's saying a lot. So, John Smith also, after he returned to the colony, he made arrangements to investigate the places that he was told about where people who wore European-style clothes and had walled houses, because he wanted to, like, see, you know, who these people were. And then a dispute happened, and he was not able to do that, obviously, because there's lots of stuff going on around then.
Right.
A lot of stuff going down. And then he did end up being able to send out 2 search parties with the instructions to find the lost company of Sir Walter Raleigh, but neither group could find any signs of colonists living in the area. And that's basically the investigations. After that, there wasn't a lot of like stuff done to find them. So we're going to go into the theories.
Love a theory. Sorry, I'm eating chocolate.
It's okay. You need sugar. Yeah, it's theory time. So the first theory we're going to talk about is what we were just talking about, which was it Powhatan?
Powhatan.
Powhatan. Basically, there's David Beersquane, who is an Irish historian.
Okay.
And his thought of what had happened was that the colonists sought to relocate to the original destination that they had planned, which was Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
Using their remaining boats. So the plan was, in this theory, that a small group would stay at CROATOAN to wait for White to return and direct him to the new colony. They're always keeping small groups of people places. They really should just all go and hope for the best. Like, why are you going to leave a small group anywhere?
Right.
But because obviously he was not able to locate them, it was basically thought that the main body of the colonists had assimilated with the Chesapeans.
I like that. Chesapeans,
and then the lookouts that had remained ended up blending into the Croatan tribe. So basically, the small group that stayed ended up with the Croatans, and then the group that moved to Chesapeake Bay ended up with the Chesapeans. What?
But wouldn't you think that, like, when people came to, like, investigate or find them, they were like, hey, I was part of that colony?
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
So we talked about how Pocahontas' dad said that he had killed the tribe, and then there were people with white faces there, and they had killed all of them.
Right.
So this theory basically said, like, they blended into these 2 separate tribes, and then the Powhatan tribe attacked. So
okay, Powhatan saw the white face. And
attacked them and the tribe because, again,
right,
the priest had said that a great power would, like, come from that area. So there's that theory.
Right.
Okay. And then assimilation into nearby tribes just overall is also just like the most likely theory of what happened. So basically they would have obviously exhausted their supplies, and so they would discard them and their culture as time went on if they assimilated into other tribes. So colonial era Europeans actually observed that many people removed from European society by Native Americans, even if they were like captured or enslaved, were usually reluctant to return to European like culture, and like it was just like better. So they didn't even tend to want to come back, was what they had found like overall.
But wouldn't somebody recognize them?
not
Like,
if
hey, I know you.
not if maybe they. I mean, not everybody probably came in contact with people like in the villages.
Yeah, I guess.
So yeah, basically they'd found that a lot of people were moved from European society didn't even want to come back, even if they'd been captured. They just weren't interested in coming back. So it was reasonable to conclude that they wouldn't seek out, like that them or even their descendants wouldn't seek out English settlers, and they would just be happy with where they were.
Right.
So there were also reports of pale-skinned, blonde-haired people among various Native American tribes as early as 1607. And a lot of people do attribute that to the assimilated lost colonists, though there's also just a chance that it was like albinism, because there is a higher rate of albinism in Native American tribes. So
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It could have just been that. But
Did they have pink eyes?
I don't think that people have pink eyes. That's just cats.
No, people can have pink eyes. Like pink around their eyes.
Oh, I don't know.
Albinos, usually.
I thought they usually had gray eyes.
Oh, maybe I'm just...
Animals have pink eyes when they are albino, but I don't think people do. She's looking it up.
Okay, so they actually... Most people with albinism have blue eyes, and some have hazel or brown eyes. Mm-hmm. But the reason why it's a common myth that they have red eyes, but lighting conditions can allow the blood vessels at the back of the eye to be seen in albinism.
Oh, interesting.
In people with albinism.
Okay, gotcha. Got it. So either way, evidence basically does support the settlers splitting off from the
And
colony
just assimilating.
and assimilating, especially because, like, as we talked about, like the CROATOAN tribe was like a smaller tribe, and they were they were very close to them. And so there's a historian named James Horn, okay? And he said, quote, "My interpretation is that settlers were under the protection of the powerful Choanokes," so that's another tribe, "who lived along the north bank of the Chowan River. Then there's another guy, and his last name is Dawson, and I forgot to write his first name."
Jack.
Yes, it was Jack from the Titanic.
Come back.
He said, in quotes, "They were never lost. It was made up. The mystery is over." He also said, and this is what I talked to you about when I first was doing the research, and said this isn't as much of a mystery as like people like say it is, really.
Right.
And he said, in quotes, "The entire concept of the colony being lost is total fiction. The truth of the CROATOAN was lost in order to prop up a racist myth designed to hide assimilation. In 1937, the Lost Colony play was created, and North Carolina was still 30 years away from being desegregated. If they had a play that ended with the colony assimilating and the CROATOAN... No. If they had a play that ended with the colony assimilating with the CROATOAN, the public would have torn down the stage. It also would have been impossible to pretend that the colony was lost if the relationship they had with the CROATOAN was explained." So basically somebody was trying to like create a play, so they were doing research, and that's when it all came about, like, oh, it's a lost colony, because they knew at that time if they had a play ending in like colonists like assimilating with tribes, people would like freak out because they're racist. So
Fair. That's a fair point.
But not everybody agrees with the theory. There's a man named Dr. Alan Outlaw. He's an archaeologist, and he calls that conclusion storytelling, not evidence-based information. And then another archaeologist named Nick Lucchetti.
I mean, a lot of stories come from fact.
That's true. But Nick Lucchetti said, "I have," in quotes, "I have not seen any evidence at CROATOAN of artifacts that indicate that Englishmen were definitely living there." So Dawson wrote a book. It's called The Lost Colony in Hatteras Island, because that's what it's called now. Hatteras Island.
Okay.
And he did say that he had no smoking gun of evidence that proved that they had assimilated with the tribes. So there were some objects found on that island where the Croatan tribe resided. So they found like broken bowls that were definitely from England. They found a hilt of an iron rapier sword, a writing tablet made of slate, and inglets, which were like small copper tubes that were used to secure wool fibers. But other items that they found were actually dated 100 years after the disappearance, so it's possible that those items were from
Like later.
like a later period. So that's, again, not a smoking gun, that they definitely were there. So then there was another theory that the colonists attempted to return to England. So obviously, as we discussed, like, John White was not able to come back for like a really long time. So obviously a sea voyage is like a chunk of time for sure. Like, from the gist of all the ones we've looked at, it's usually like 3-4 months. Like, it's a long time, but like, I feel like there had to be a certain point where they were like, he should be back by now, and he is not. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they're thinking maybe they tried to return to England. Obviously, they still had their pinnace, which was like that ship we talked about earlier. It's like a smaller ship.
Right.
And those ships are capable of making transatlantic trips, but they usually don't do so alone. They're a part of a fleet. Like, they have other ships with them. It's not usually just a ship that crosses the ocean by itself. But it was capable of doing it. It just didn't usually happen by itself. So they may have feared the standard route across the Atlantic Ocean with the stop in the Caribbean also could have risked a Spanish attack. So the theory states that they might have just taken a direct course to England. But the only problem with that theory is that ship was not large enough to carry all of the colonists and all of the supplies that they would need. So then the theory is sort of like, well, maybe they built a second ship, and maybe then they just took both of them back. They tried to take both of them back to England. But basically, even in that theory, not everybody would have been able to make it onto both of those ships. So there would have been some people left in Virginia. So then what happened to them? If everyone else got on the ships and the ships sank, there still would have been people left behind. So that theory doesn't necessarily fill in the blanks of what would have happened to them. So there's that. So then there's another theory. You remember the sassafras?
Yeah.
For real this time.
For real, yeah.
So there's a theory that Raleigh dispatched that colony to harvest sassafras, and that losing contact with them was actually falsified so that they could conceal the operation from the Spanish and other potential competitors in the sassafras industry. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So,
that sassafras industry.
It's a fierce industry, that sassafras industry. So that theory was backed by an abandoned settlement called Beachland that had reports of small coffins with Christian markings on it, which encouraged speculation that it was linked somehow to the Lost Colony. There's these two guys. One's named Philip McMullen and Fred Willard. And their theory, this was their little theory, and they thought that the colony was not truly abandoned, and the secret of the colony's location just happened to die with Raleigh in 1618. And after they lost contact with him, because it was his little situation, that was when they started to assimilate with the Croatans at Beachland.
I kind of like that one.
But the problem with this theory is
shit.
Yeah, there's always a problem with the theories, okay? The problem with this theory is that sassafras prices didn't actually skyrocket in value until the late 1590s. So, like, there wouldn't have been, like, we're talking about the sassafras industry. It wasn't popping then. It wasn't popping when the second colony got there. It wasn't until, like, 10 years later that kind of became a bigger, like, moneymaker. So, part of this theory was also that Raleigh needed this, like, plan of his to compensate for how much they lost the first time that they tried to settle the colony in the 1585 version. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that Grenville actually, like, did some privateering, and he recovered the costs of that failed colony, so he didn't need to make up for that. So that was the problem with that theory.
Right.
Though, sassafras, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then, you know,
#sassafras.
You know how we were talking about 1937 and the play, and how that's when it all kind of came about, that it was a lost colony or whatever? Mm-hmm. So when P. Green was collecting materials for said play, he noticed a lot of Spanish records from that period. And a lot of those records referenced Raleigh a lot, and the settlements that he had, and how the Spanish forces knew that the English were planning to make a base in that area. And they were actually searching for the base before White's colonists even got there. So this theory basically was just like, you know, the Spanish Empire had already made it to Florida, and they, as we had said earlier, they had claims to it and didn't even recognize England's right to colonize the area. They were like, this is actually ours, so you can't actually have it at all. So this theory is basically that the Spanish attacked the colonists, and that's what happened to them. But here's some problems with that. One, there were no bodies.
Right.
There's no blood.
That's the big thing. Like, there's
no evidence of a fight at all.
Right.
Things are like...
And, like, if they're going to massacre them, they're not going to take the time to, like, get rid of their bodies.
No, you could argue they don't want to cause issues, like, with the English, but they could never even prove that it was them that did it, because they were in a hostile area,
right,
where they were having issues because they were burning villages because of cups and, like, staking leaders' heads and being, colonizing people, causing problems.
Right.
So there's literally no reason, if you came back to a bunch of bodies on the ground, that you'd be like, this was the Spanish.
This was the Spaniard.
You know what I mean? So they would have no reason to clean it up or anything, and there was no evidence of a fight, so...
Right.
There's no real reason to think that it could have been the Spanish. So now I have two kind of like little small fun things. Have you heard about the Dare Stones?
I read about that. I don't really remember anything, no. I feel like I have heard of it.
I think when I say it, you're going to remember it, kind of. So the Dare Stones were a series of inscribed stones that were discovered, and they were claimed to have been written by Eleanor Dare, which was John White's daughter.
Right.
So these stones were apparently, they told the travelings of the colonists and their ultimate deaths. Like, they're just like journals,
basically
but
records,
stones.
Kinda,
records. But most historians believe that they're a fraud because all of them, except for the first one, have been linked to a stonecutter named Bill Eberhard. But the first one is sometimes regarded to be different than the rest of them, based on, like, they did, like, chemical analysis, linguistic analysis, and a lot of people do think the first one was legit.
Okay.
And then all the rest of them were just Bill, like, making them up for fun. Because the first one was discovered...
He was America's first scammer. No.
Probably not.
No, probably.
So the first one was discovered in... It says 1937, but that's the same year as, like, the play, and I'm like,
that's kind of sketch.
And now I'm just like, did I write that down wrong, or is like, why is everything happening in 37? But it was discovered 65 miles west of Roanoke, and the first stone appeared to have authentic Elizabethan English, unlike the ones that came later that were more blatantly frauds and not even remotely the time. It also provided more believable historical record of events, which were as followed: that the colonists moved further west past the wetlands until a horrific Native American attack in 1591 killed most of the settlers, including Ananias Dare, which was her husband, and 4-year-old Virginia Dare, which was her daughter. The stone acted as the last word of Eleanor Dare because it was also signed EWD. And it painted kind of a grim final portrait of these 7 survivors lost in the woods.
And she was just the last one.
Mm-hmm. So those are the Dare Stones. Again, most of them are considered to be fake, except for the first one.
Right.
Which I kind of feel like might be legit, the first one.
Yeah.
I think so. It makes sense that if anybody survived, somebody would be trying to keep record of what was happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And have you heard of the map?
No.
I know the Dare Stones has like a cool...
Right.
The Dare Stones, because she has a cool last name. There's nothing cool to say about them. I mean, there is stuff that's cool to say about the map, but not a cool, like, title. You know what I mean? I don't have anything cool to say.
Say it, not cool.
The map.
The map.
Have you heard of the map? The map. Okay, so there was a map. You remember how we were having a little back and forth about John White being an artist? And I was like, no. And you were like, that's what you said. And I was like, oh, maybe he made a map.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. And on that map, there were 2 patches that were hiding some things beneath them.
Oh, it's like national treasure.
Do you want to know how much I knew you were going to say that? The next bullet, I wrote cue Nick Cage reference. Because I knew that you were going to do it.
I am so predictable.
I knew that you were going to do it.
I'm kind of disappointed in myself that I'm so predictable.
Anyway, so there was a patch. So there was like... Okay, so first of all, I do want it noted that it is said that patches were actually kind of common in map making, because if you were going to all of this work and you made one tiny mistake, you weren't going to start over.
You're going to, shit, give me a new parchment.
You don't have erasers, but you weren't going to start over. So I will say that it's not uncommon to have patches, but using modern
like whiteout before whiteout.
Yeah, so using modern technology, like they were able to reveal that beneath the patch there was a blue and red star. And if you're vibing with this theory, people think that that's where the settlers went. They went to that star, that's where the new fort was. And researchers call that spot Site X.
X marks the spot.
Exactly. So before we go into Site X for a second, I will also talk about the facts. So they put a patch on top of that star, right?
Yeah.
But then there were light markings of the fort on top of the patch. And why would you cover something up and then write it again? So the British Museum says that it was probably just the mark faded over time, but some people think that it was invisible ink.
Ooh.
And that he inked over the patch with the fort, but he used invisible ink, so you would only be able to find it if you knew to look for it.
Yeah. With lemon juice and heat.
Exactly. I wasn't sure if the reference would come after that point or after this point, but I put it at the right spot. So
yeah.
Proud of myself.
Yeah.
So Site X, between 2013 and 2015, archaeologists actually found more than 30 artifacts during excavations at Site X.
Oh, wow.
Though many dated after the colony's time, ceramic shards were able to connect it a little bit more to Roanoke because settlers during that time used them, and the company that made the ceramics failed in 1624. So it couldn't be too much, you know what I mean? It was like kind of outdated stuff.
Yeah.
So they used that to kind of connect the possibility that maybe that was some stuff from Roanoke. So that's the map. And now we got to talk about aliens.
Of course, because why wouldn't we?
Yeah. So the alien theory, it's short, it's sweet. There were no bodies. There was no mass graves. Nothing was ever found.
First alien abduction of America.
Exactly. Some people also say if they left willingly, why did they just leave such a shitty clue? Why did they just carve CROATOAN into a tree? Why didn't they leave anything else to be like go here? Yeah, because they weren't there. They were the aliens. And some people say on the map, the little star and the patch that covered it up wasn't a fort, but it was actually where the aliens landed. They were marking a landing spot to be like, oh, there's aliens over here.
Interesting. So the map maker just knew that there was aliens?
I don't know. Okay, this is a very short theory, but
Like, I think I saw a UFO over there.
But anti-alien theory, 115 people? That's a lot to people to take. You usually abduct a couple willy-nilly. You're not abducting an entire... You're not going zoop and taking 115.
if it was their
How
first
big is your
time,
spaceship that you're doing that? You know
would
what I
think
mean?
it would be
How
pretty big.
roomy is the spaceship that it can fit 115 people? Got a lot of probes. Got a lot of beds.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? So
never know.
that's a little anti-alien theory for you. You know, you're saying if it was their first alien invasion,
If it's their first time,
maybe
they're
they've
like,
never
let's take a large sample.
they've maybe never been to Earth, so they were like, let's just take them all.
Yeah, and then they kind of learned from that because they're like, oh, look at these dumbasses asking all these questions. Well, we'll be a little bit more
Subtle.
next time.
Okay, so your argument is that it was their first invasion
Yeah.
and abduction.
Their first invasion.
So then another option is cannibalism.
Ew.
So yeah, cannibalism was another option. Obviously, I'm going to talk about Jamestown now, so you got to sing the song. You said you were going to. When I brought it up, you said you were going to sing the song.
I know, but I can't think of how it starts.
Let's look it up.
Which one?
I don't know. You're the one that said you were going to sing a
The
song.
Virginia Company? Or all I can think is the Native American one. Yeah. Yeah, this one. In 1607, we sailed the open seas.
Though this was kind of a fucked up movie, though. You know what I mean? If you really think about it.
But it's my favorite.
Oof.
It's my fave.
Oof. Oof to you and that.
I love Pocahontas. She's so beautiful. And her voice is good and just great. Love it. It's my fave.
Anyway, so
Forever and always.
in Jamestown, obviously they did have to resort to cannibalism in 1609 to stay alive. So obviously it's possible that it happened in Roanoke too.
Maybe.
There's a precedent for it. Well, a reverse precedent, but you know what I
But
mean.
then who's the last person eating all the people?
And also, you're not...
Jeffrey Dahmer's ancestors. Sorry.
Also, obviously, like, you're not eating an entire person, so there would still be, like, evidence left behind. Yeah, so, like, there would be evidence left behind, you know what I mean? Like, you're not eating bones,
Right.
you know? But, like, a pro to that theory, like, a little point towards it as, like, an option, is during the investigations into the disappearance of the settlers, local tribes did mention that there were internal conflicts going on between the colonists. So we kind of have to point in the direction of something happening because there was like infighting.
Yeah.
So people think, well, maybe that's what was going on. They were eating each other. And then the final theory.
That would piss you off.
Yeah. The final theory is that like a disease could have struck.
Yeah.
There could have been like a plague that.
Of zombieism.
What's so funny is that's actually another theory.
That's supernatural.
I actually I didn't skip it, but I went with the mild version because the theory said zombie plague, and I just went with disease.
And that could go with the cannibalism. Holy shit, I solved it.
Well, anyway, I went with just the regular disease option, which, like, it could have been a plague that presented with symptoms of, like, delirium, paranoia, and madness, which also could have explained the infighting.
Like the bath salts thing.
Yeah, and it could have also been that the healthy wanted to get rid of the sick, so that easily could have escalated into a violent situation, right? And then those who survived could have then assimilated into other tribes.
So it's like kind of a combo of everything.
Yeah, but the problem with that one, in my opinion, is if there was a plague that was causing, like, delirium and there was, like, a violent escalation...
And they thought there were aliens because they were paranoid. That's all of them wrapped
You're
in a
tying
big
them
old
all
bow.
in. She's tying them all together. But this is just another example, though. Like, if there was a violent confrontation, there's no evidence of it at all.
Yeah.
You know, there's no evidence of...
There wouldn't be, would there, if there were aliens?
Well, yeah, that they would have sorted that whole situation out. But obviously, you know, if aliens weren't involved, there probably would have been bodies.
Yeah.
So that's it. Those are all the theories.
Love it.
What do you think?
I think it was a little bit of everything. I think there was a disease that caused hysteria, that made people eat each other, and then the rest, the survivors, assimilated into the neighboring tribes, and it all...
Here's what I think happened. So, here's my only thing that I think is kind of weird.
Yeah.
So, you know how we were talking about how they might have tried to go back to England?
Yeah.
My thing, you don't like that one, but I do like that one because any of these theories, where did their ships go? If they assimilated into other tribes, couldn't the tribes use a ship, or wouldn't they use the part? Like, wouldn't there be
Pirates.
I just feel like there might have been like a split.
The hurricanes.
There might have been like split. I can't think of the word. Like, maybe there was infighting because people were having different opinions of what they should do. Maybe some people wanted to stay and like assimilate with the tribes, and then some people wanted to go back to England, and they were like, me, what should we do? So I think some people tried to go back to England, and the ships crashed. And then I think the rest of the people stayed behind and assimilated into other tribes, because then that would make sense, because they already said you wouldn't be able to fit all the people onto the ship. So maybe there are people who wanted to stay behind, so then the ones that didn't were able to go back, and then
so
it sank.
I'm sticking with my theory, but I'm saying that hurricane came and wrecked the ship, and that's where they went and just
Wrecked the ship while they were on it, or just like when it was just
blew
out?
it to smithereens.
Yeah, but like people love looking for shipwrecks. You don't think they would have found it by now?
Well, the same for you. Like if they got in a wreck and they never.
But that could be anywhere. That could be anywhere in the ocean, though. But the ship just would have been docked offshore.
Maybe or maybe not. Maybe it wasn't their anchor fucked up.
No, there were a lot of ships, but the anchor that was fucked up was John White's ship when he came to look for them.
Okay.
And that's why they had to leave and they couldn't go back.
Well, maybe that one was fucked up too. And we just
maybe there was a lot of fucked up anchors, is what you're saying.
Those anchors, man.
It could be.
They'll kill you.
I know there were a lot of ships, but yeah,
they'll cause a lot of trouble.
Apparently that could be. So that's it. That's what I have.
I'm sticking to my theory.
I like you just think it was everything combined into one thing.
It's my favorite. It's kind of like how I was with Diet Love Pass, though, too.
That's true, but I liked yours on Diet Love. Also, you remember how I talked to you the other day about that Supreme Court ruling?
Yeah.
I wrote about it on here because I felt like that kind of tied in because we're talking about.
I didn't get why, but
I
figured you would tell me.
I'll tell you now because I wrote it down. But I figured it kind of tied in because we're talking about, English people coming here and being the way that they are and like killing people over cups and staking heads and stealing land. And then like just on the 29th, that was when the Supreme Court overturned Oklahoma versus Castro Huerta, which is Huerta.
How do you spell it?
Huerta.
Huerta.
Yes.
Huerta.
So basically, I can explain it to you better now since we only talked about it a little bit the other day.
Yeah.
It's about prosecuting crimes committed by non-Indians in Indian country, is what it says. Quotes. But I didn't think we said Indians anymore. Because didn't people call people Indians because they reminded people of Indians in India?
No.
He's nodding.
No.
Back in the day, didn't they
We called them Indians because when Christopher Columbus landed, he thought he landed in the West Indies.
That's what I thought you were referencing.
Oh, well then, yeah, but then, okay, the point is, but it's about prosecuting crimes, basically, right?
Okay.
And so, Kavanaugh and Roberts and Thomas and Alito and Barrett were pro, so obviously if they're pro, then it's bad, because there's the stupid ones, right? And so, basically...
The stupid one.
Well, they are. You see Kavanaugh and it's stupid. So basically, by overturning this, the Supreme Court is giving states more power over tribal land, is the gist.
Right.
Because it's undermining their autonomy and, it's impacting how they prosecute crimes on reservations. And it's overturning, 200 years of precedents that are recognizing that tribal nations can be self-governing. And you know what I mean? And it's basically saying, no, the states can do some things if they want to do some things.
More power.
Yeah. It's just basically they consider it like a blow to the sovereignty of the tribes. And it's raising concerns about usurping their autonomy. And, they think it's also going to, complicate prosecutions and, domestic violence and sexual assault cases. We don't want to trust the states to actually prosecute people correctly. No. That's going to be like that guy who got who was a swimmer. Remember him? Remember the swimmer guy?
Yeah.
I forget his name. Brock
Turner.
And his 2 months or whatever.
I read that book. You should read that.
I didn't know there was a book.
His victim. She wrote, it's, what the fuck's it called? Call Me By My Name or something like that. I read it. It's really good. Hold on. Let me look it up.
Okay.
Know My Name by Chanel Miller.
Okay.
It's really good, and it has 4.72 stars on.
Oh, that's a high.
Goodreads.
That is a high score.
Out of 134,000 ratings.
That's a high score.
It's an amazing book, but trigger warnings. It's so sad the shit that her and her family went through because of that privileged white boy, basically.
Literally. But anyway, there's Elizabeth Reese, who is an assistant professor at Stanford and a citizen of Nambe. I want to say that correctly. I'm gonna look it up. Nambe Pueblo.
What is it? Pueblo? Mm-hmm. See, I could have told you that.
Nambe Pueblo. She's among many indigenous legal experts and attorneys, and that are worried basically that it's going to embolden state governments to diminish the ability of tribal nations to self-govern. Basically, just like Roe versus Wade, kind of like a starting point to just fuck around and do what a bunch of old white men want to do.
Unlimited power.
And basically, and then instead of being able to self-govern, that eventually they would have to rely on, quote, institutions that are not designed to represent us and have historically fought against us. Why would you want to be governed by us? You wouldn't after everything, even just what we're talking about today. And she said, quote, as a citizen of a tribal nation, I feel violated after fighting for our own independence and then negotiating this shared situation with the federal government for so long. It's just an erosion of our ability to be the governments that we are. So that's what she had to say. But then, of course, Justice Brett Kavanaugh had to say that he found that tribal lands are part of the states that they are in, and they are not entirely separate sovereign powers. And he said, quote, As a matter of state sovereignty, a state has jurisdiction over all of its territory, including Indian country. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like it's important. Like, we talked about Roe versus Wade, but like, you have to pay attention to everything that the Supreme Court is doing, not just the ones that affect you. And like, that's some bullshit when I heard about it. And it's just like, they did Roe versus Wade, then they did this, and now what are they going to do? They're just going to keep fucking going.
Yep.
Okay, we're not going to rant about the Supreme Court again, but I wanted to bring that one up too, because it kind of related, because we were talking about white people being shitty this entire episode. And that's all I have. The end.
The end.
The end of the episode. VR thinks it was aliens and cannibalism and disease
And
assimilation and hurricanes.
That's right.
I think it was shipwreck
Wrapped
and
in
assimilation.
a pretty little bow.
I think it was shipwrecks and assimilation. That's what I think. I just feel like if the boats or the ships were still there, that would be super weird. No, that's the opposite of what I'm saying. If the ships were still there, it could have been anything. It could have been assimilation.
Right.
But like, why would the ships
Not be there.
And not ever be found? Like, if you assimilated, wouldn't you have taken them to where you went and been like, hey, could you use these? This is some stuff.
Anybody want a boat?
Anyone want a ship? There's parts. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe they did, and maybe they dismantled them and then used it for other things, but then wouldn't you find like proof of that? You know how the Titanic had like numbers written on it? Did they write things on ships? I don't fucking know. The point is, I just feel like if they had dismantled it, they still could have found some evidence of it somewhere. So it's weird to me that it's not there at all, which is why I think that some people tried to go back in England and it sank.
The hurricane took her.
The hurricane took her and they never found it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's it. That's all I have. So, yeah, that's the episode. Hope you liked it, Jamie.
Yeah, this is for you, Jamie.
This is for our first reviewer. Sorry that it was a lot of history. Hopefully you like history. And hopefully you hate Brett Kavanaugh. Or the end of it would have been awkward. But I don't regret it. But yeah, so
if you want to be like Jamie,
if you review, we'll end up having a combo, and then maybe you have an episode, and then it'll end up being the very next episode that we do.
Maybe
it'll be super creepy if it's the other episode that I almost did but didn't do.
That would be fun.
Then I'd feel like y'all were reading my mind somehow.
I haven't picked mine yet, so
true. But what if somebody waited a week and then said,
maybe,
they said,
yeah,
Oak Island. That's what it was.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden they're reading my mind. You know what I mean?
There's a show about that.
Exactly. That's why I ended up not doing it, because it felt oversaturated. There wasn't a show when I had first heard about it. But yeah, if you leave a review, maybe you'll end up having your own episode.
But at the very least, we'll shout your name out because we appreciate you.
Well, that too. Yeah, we're definitely going to read it out loud like we promised. But if it doesn't end in a combo where you get your own episode, then that's fair too. That's Jamie's just our first reviewer, so she deserved it.
Besides Alex, but he's biased.
Yeah, well, he's in the room when we record, so it doesn't count. Okay, so that's all.
Yeah, that's all we have. Thanks for listening. Follow us on all of our social medias. Interact with us. We love it. Tell us how you heard about us, if you're not related or friends with us.
Yeah, so that we can figure out the best marketing ploys.
But yeah, so thanks for listening, and
we are Mysteriosities. Oh.
I wanted to do a weird bad harmony.
It's really bad, actually. It was pretty ugly.
It was perfect.
It was pretty ugly.